Bowie's 70th birthday. But the musician succumbed to cancer on January 10th, 2016, just 2 days after releasing his final album, Blackstar, and 3 days after releasing the haunting music video for Lazarus. Initially, critics were both impressed by Bowie's artistry and confused and unsettled by his images and lyrics. Before his death, The Guardian called the album an unexpected left turn, executed with enviable aplomb. On the day the music video for Lazarus was released, Pitchfork commented only that they found it disturbing. Rolling Stone went even further, calling the video nightmarish. But after Bowie's death, it became clear that Blackstar was more than a dark, avant-garde art rock album. With Blackstar, Bowie had written his own epitaph. When he died 2 days after the release of this final album, fans and critics alike began to embrace his unsettling final work and sift through it for meaning, because they saw Blackstar and the music video for Lazarus in particular as what Bowie's producer Visconti called a parting gift from Bowie to his fans. But Bowie's final album is even more than this. It's an intricate mystery, something that will continue to challenge and intrigue us all for a long, long time. Today, I will begin part 1 of my 3-part series dedicated to explaining what I think may be happening in David Bowie's music videos for Blackstar and Lazarus. But my explanation is only one of many. Leave a comment below if you want to talk more about the explanation I offer here, or if you want to offer a new perspective altogether. I'd love to start a discussion about these beautiful music videos. For most of his career, Bowie had been satisfied to put art first and himself second. He tended to put out concept albums with complex, highly orchestrated music, and lyrics so minimalistic, dense, and elusive that his work, over time, began to resemble the work of the modernist poets more than that of other contemporary rock stars.
To a certain extent, there was a lot of things that he was doing and reading and listening to that really inspired me. A love of jazz and a love of the modern American poets and writers, and I think that was terribly important.
In fact, in 1972, the London Times writer Michael Whale went so far as to call his music T.S. Eliot with a rock and roll beat. One thing that makes David Bowie's music seem so universal is the fact that different people can take very different meanings from the same songs. But in order to unlock the deeper meaning behind Bowie's music, it's often necessary to identify one or more keys. And I don't mean musical keys, I mean interpretive keys. Identifying a key means identifying allusions to current events, to other literary works, or to Bowie's own biographical details. Identifying these keys helps you to locate the context of the work and helps you to make sense of what might otherwise seem to be nonsensical or meaningless phrasing. Without at least one key, usually one of two things happens. You find yourself encountering lyrics that you can see are meaningful in some way, but in such a way that you feel like you're missing something. The second thing that could happen is that you mishear Bowie's tone. Bowie himself is very amused at this. Heroes is probably one of Bowie's most frequently misunderstood songs. Heroes is often lauded as a great love ballad, a story of star-crossed lovers in war-torn Berlin, overcoming all obstacles in order to be together, if only for one day. However, according to Bowie, that's not really what the song was about. In a 1977 interview with Charles Shaar Murray of New Musical Express magazine, Bowie makes it clear that he is not sincere in calling his lovers heroes. Murray asked Bowie why there were quotation marks around the title of the song and the album, Heroes. Bowie responded by saying, "I felt the use of quotes indicated a dimension of irony about the word heroes, or about the whole concept of heroism. So the quotations around the title indicate that Bowie's being sarcastic when he calls the lovers in his song heroes." Bowie then went on to talk about the real-life couple that inspired the song. His recording studio in West Berlin, where Bowie recorded the album Heroes, was near the Berlin Wall. Each day he saw a man and a woman who would meet underneath one of the turrets to have lunch and carry on. Bowie reasoned that since they were meeting in such a dangerous and unusual place, they were obviously having an affair. He explains, of all the places to meet in Berlin, why pick a bench underneath a guard turret on the wall? They'd come from different directions and always meet there. Well, they were both from the West, but they had always met right there. And I, using license, presumed that they were feeling somewhat guilty about this affair, and so they had imposed this restriction on themselves, thereby giving themselves an excuse for their heroic act. I use this as a basis. Therefore, it is ironic.
Song or an anti-song?
Heroes was about what is sort of irreverently termed the faceless man, the person on the street who at one time in his life must have his own chance at heroism, right. Even if it's an affair with somebody, that he can feel that he's a hero.
So, in the case of the song Heroes, some information about Bowie's personal experiences is essential to understanding Bowie's intended tone. The same is true of Blackstar, although some literary allusions are also key components of his meaning. But Blackstar and Lazarus are different from Heroes or anything else David Bowie's ever worked on throughout his career, and not only for the most obvious reasons. You do still need keys to interpret Blackstar and Lazarus, but it doesn't look at all like David Bowie prepared his album or his music videos with any kind of consideration for keeping his more high-minded material accessible and fun on a superficial level, as he did with Heroes. The videos for Blackstar and Lazarus are not pleasant, and they're not meant to be. They're meant to disturb you deeply and make you contemplate the material that he's working with. Bowie's advertising that he has secrets to tell, and for the first time he isn't sugarcoating them for us. He isn't smoothing out the rough edges. More than ever, he seems concerned with being understood rather than with having his music generally enjoyed. Because of that, the album and the videos are uncomfortable and unprecedentedly dense. It will probably take the world decades to arrive at any kind of general consensus about what we think his final work really meant. That's because, despite how different Blackstar may be from Bowie's previous work, David Bowie is still David Bowie. And what I mean by that is that even though Bowie seems, more than ever, concerned with getting a particular message across, he also can't seem to bring himself to be too straightforward. Even in his final work, he doesn't appear before his audience as himself. Not completely. But so often in his work, he is telling a story and casting himself as a character.
And so on, and prophecies of the world running out of food and stuff like that.
I'm a storyteller and a story writer, and I decided that I preferred to enact a lot of the material I was writing rather than perform it as myself. At this moment, I'm performing as myself, but I will continue in the future, after I've done what I wish to do at the moment, return back to writing stories, and I will enact them again, and I don't care what anybody says, I like doing it, and it's what I shall continue to do.
Well, I'm not stopping you.
David Bowie has built his career by continually changing personas.
Prospect of virtual reincarnation is something that we've seen in your career. I mean, Ziggy, Thin White Duke, all of them.
Oh, I'm the chameleon of rock, you know.
No, but did you feel like
Self-reinvention is my middle name, because you know my motto, changes.
When he's performing, Bowie rarely appears completely separate from his personas, even when he's at his most raw and vulnerable. Even his most personal confessions are usually attributed to a given character, even if that character isn't fully developed or doesn't have a name, or seems like just another version of Bowie himself. According to director Johan Renck, Blackstar is no different. In an interview with Noisy, Renck identifies 3 characters in the Blackstar video: the preacher, the trickster, and Button Eyes. In my reading of the Blackstar video, I see Button Eyes as the latest incarnation of a familiar face, the Thin White Duke. There's no doubt that the Duke does make an appearance, In Lazarus, he appears in the same silver and black outfit that he wore on the back cover of Station to Station. My argument here is that Button Eyes and the Thin White Duke are the same character. Bowie alludes to the Thin White Duke in the third verse of Lazarus, where he recalls being in New York. Bowie moved to New York in 1974, shortly before the Duke first emerged. During the mid to late 70s, money was tight for Bowie. He had signed a bad deal with Main Man, his management company at the time, and his cocaine addiction was expensive. In Lazarus, Bowie characterizes his cocaine addiction, which worsened when he moved to New York, as a search for God. The idea that cocaine is a path to deeper knowledge is consistent with Aleister Crowley's views of the drug. In Cocaine, Crowley writes, "Is there not a school of philosophers that accounts God to be a mocker? They should base their theses on cocaine. For here is bitterness, irony, cruelty ineffable. This gift of sudden and sure happiness is given but to tantalize. The happiness of cocaine is not passive or placid as that of beasts. It is self-conscious. It tells man what he is and what he might be. It offers him the semblance of divinity, only that he may know himself a worm. It awakens discontent. It creates hunger." Bowie, like many other musicians of the 70s, was very familiar with Crowley's work, and seems to be alluding to Crowley's beliefs about cocaine in Lazarus. The implication is that Bowie's cocaine addiction was, at least initially, spiritually driven. He was looking for God, but instead of God, Bowie, who seemed to be afflicted by a cocaine psychosis, found the Superman, the man-god, the Thin White Duke within himself. In order to begin to understand both Blackstar and Lazarus, it's important to understand who the Thin White Duke was to Bowie, and why he's the only previous persona that really makes an appearance in his final work. The Thin White Duke was Bowie's persona for Station to Station. Bowie has a habit of referring to his personas as separate individuals, as though he isn't entirely in control of them. But the Duke is a special case.
Is it true that you used to save your urine because you thought Jimi Hendrix would use it in a potion?
Jimi Hendrix? No, I wrote about that in a book that I was writing called The Thin White Duke, and he kept it in a refrigerator.
You did?
No, The Thin White Duke did.
Oh, right, I see.
Which it wasn't me, you see.
Oh, yes, okay, David.
But, oh, yes, it was.
But the Duke has always been markedly separate from Bowie. After leaving the Duke behind, Bowie said of him that he was a caricature of evil, a nasty character indeed, and a would-be romantic with no emotions at all. He even says that Station to Station seems to him a piece of work by a different person entirely, reporting that he has no memory of its creation whatsoever.
But as drugs started to take a more severe hold on my life, the ability within your conscious mind to actually deliver yourself into two separate parts disappears, and the lines blur, and it's only this one formless mutant that's left behind. So it gets quite messy in there. It gets very messy in there. And by the mid-70s, I was so out of my gourd that really it was very impossible. It was all nigh on impossible for me to function in any rational way. So I didn't know I was playing characters at that time.
The Thin White Duke emerged at a time that was both the height of Bowie's cocaine addiction and the peak of Bowie's existential crisis. Some of the songs of Station to Station, such as Word on a Wing, can be viewed as Christian hymns, and Bowie was often seen wearing a silver crucifix with his iconic Thin White Duke outfit. But on the same album, the title track, Station to Station, makes casual references to the occult teachings of the Kabbalah and the decadent poetry of the magician Aleister Crowley. and Bowie is drawing a Kabbalistic tree of life on the back cover of the album. The two contradictory themes in the album reflect the fact that Bowie was constantly torn between a desire to commit himself to Christianity, or possibly Catholicism, and a contradictory desire to become a particular, dark version of Nietzsche's Superman. A man that Nietzsche predicted would be the next stage of man's evolution and would become a substitute for the Christian God, who was losing the power to captivate people in what anthropologist James Frazer would later call the Age of Science. More on that in part 2. It was during this period that Bowie stirred a lot of controversy by expressing fascist sympathies and comparing himself to Hitler. But once Bowie was off cocaine, he would look back at his actions as a Thin White Duke uncomfortably, and often seemed dissociated from his life during that period. His comments about not remembering the composition of the album, and about feeling as though the Duke were an entirely different person, are not flippant or intended to impact his audience as the endearing, fascinating eccentricities of an artist. David Bowie was truly swallowed up by his own creature.
I just wanted to be like it was. Me.
It had happened to him once before with Ziggy Stardust, his androgynous, alien persona, clad in costumes inspired by traditional Japanese culture. That may be why he made a quick, on-the-spot decision to retire Ziggy Stardust on July 3rd, 1973, much to the surprise of his band and his fans.
Not only is it the last show of the tour, but it's the last show that we'll ever do. Thank you.
But where Ziggy failed, the Thin White Duke succeeded, if only temporarily. After kicking his cocaine addiction, David Bowie made a complete 180 in his beliefs, his music, and even his personality. Given Bowie's detached, even skittish attitude toward the Duke, it seems strange that Bowie would make a point of including him in his final album while excluding other personas. For instance, Jareth from Labyrinth, who also completely inhabited Bowie during the filming of Labyrinth, would have doubtlessly been a crowd pleaser. And what about Pierro from Scary Monsters? He would have seemed to have been the most obvious choice, since Bowie and Bowie's critics have had nothing but praise for that album. Well, the Goblin King may not appear, but Major Tom, who originally appeared in David Bowie's song Space Oddity in 1969, and was mentioned again later in Ashes to Ashes in 1980, may make an appearance as the skeleton spaceman in Blackstar. The skull also appears on the desk in Lazarus. And Pierro, well, he couldn't make it because he died in one version of Bowie's 2013 video, For Love Is Lost. And incidentally, it was the Thin White Duke who killed him, as if taking revenge against Pierro for imprisoning him in the 1980 music video, Ashes to Ashes. Pierro was originally a stock character from late 17th century pantomime. As a stock character, his role never changes. He's the prototypical sad clown who longs hopelessly for the love of a lady named Columbine. Columbine always rejects Pierro for the comic, light-hearted harlequin. In the 19th century, the modernists transformed him into an everyman figure, tragically trying over and over again to redefine his role, even though the script lays out his changeless fate. It's in this capacity that Bowie uses Pierro as his own persona. In his positive aspects, Bowie's Pierro is an everyman too, a face in the crowd, someone struggling to break free of the bounds of the role that he was cast in. But Bowie's Pierro is a multi-dimensional character, and has his flaws too. He is of course a clown. Bowie, remember, is British, and in the UK, clown is slang for someone who is acting foolishly, or someone with little value. It means roughly the same thing as peasant. So Pierro is the opposite of the narcissistic, noble, Thin White Duke. In creating Pierro, Bowie is switching sides, allying himself with ordinary people, and trying to find some sense of contentment. It's therefore no coincidence that Pierro first emerged shortly after Bowie kicked the cocaine addiction that he suffered most while he was a Thin White Duke. In fact, in the music video for Ashes to Ashes, we see Pierro overcoming the Thin White Duke. Pierro wanders a red planet. Maybe it's Mars. He holds up a frame and we see an ordinary-looking Bowie without makeup for a moment before we get enclosed in another frame, this one showing the Thin White Duke, enclosed and agonized in a padded room. Pierro seems pained as the Duke, looking sinister, appears to struggle with being enclosed in the room. The telescoping effect of the photographs at the beginning and the parallel presentation of the Duke and Pierro suggests that the Thin White Duke is being repressed, while Bowie struggles to become Pierro, and it is a fight. At one point, Pierro is completely pulled under the water, and the scene fades to reveal the Duke, connected and bound to what very much appears to be a heart. In the next scene, a loader tractor seems to push Pierro back to the forefront. The Duke has been overcome, but he still exists at Bowie's dark core. Bowie is still the Duke at heart. Pierro is the optimistic face of Bowie's Scary Monsters period, which Bowie later described as a kind of purge. It was me eradicating the feelings within myself that I was uncomfortable with. These feelings were the elitism, cocaine cravings, and romantic fascism embodied by the Duke. So how did it come about that Pierro, who seemed to conquer the Thin White Duke in the 80s, was murdered by the Thin White Duke? It happened in one version of the 2013 music video for Love Is Lost. In the video, Bowie projects his own face onto the white papier-mâché face of Pierro. While Bowie sings as an immobile Pierro, a wooden marionette Thin White Duke watches from a nearby darkened doorway, controlled by an unseen puppet master. He later holds a sign identifying himself as love, recalling the biblical verse that identifies God as love, and reminding viewers of the Duke's frightening narcissism. That sign might as well say God, but Bowie is more subtle than that. It is jarring when we see, standing in the shadows, down a dark hall, out of center, in a shot dominated by the marionette Duke, Bowie holding up a sign identifying himself as lost. Throughout the video, Pierro seems to be struggling to move, but can do no more than tap a foot or a hand. Pierro's movements contrast with the Duke's easy, broad, uncanny movements. We see that Bowie's hand controls the Duke, and Bowie's face, reappearing on the Pierro doll, looks frightened. Bowie places a finger in front of Pierro's mouth in a gesture that both hushes him and kills him. The marionette Duke finishes the song, and Bowie, who appears throughout the video as an onlooker, has vanished. The frightening marionette is all that remains. In overcoming Pierro, the Thin White Duke has also overcome Bowie himself. Notice here, in this slowed-down clip, how, after a flash of light, Bowie's hands disappear. Bowie is no longer controlling the marionette Thin White Duke. Maybe the Thin White Duke is now controlling Bowie. Whatever the case may be, Bowie has no agency any longer, now that the Duke has fully re-emerged. And now that all the Duke's Sinatra-inspired glamour is revealed to be merely paint, springs, and decoration on a grainy, gaunt, hollow wooden form, the seductions of the Duke are ineffective, and he's revealed to be merely an uncanny creation who has overcome the creator. So what does it all mean? Why did Bowie show us Pierro, who once conquered the Thin White Duke and all his dark meditations on humanity and religion, being killed by a glamourless Thin White Duke? I interpret this marionette Thin White Duke and his triumph over both Pierro and Bowie himself as a precursor to the Button Eyes character of Blackstar and Lazarus. I believe that Button Eyes is the latest version of the Thin White Duke. Notice how Button Eyes moves like he's on marionette strings. Come join me next week for part 2 of David Bowie's Blackstar and Lazarus Explained. I'll be talking more in depth about the Blackstar music video specifically. I'll talk more about my theory about how Button Eyes is the final incarnation of the Thin White Duke, stripped of all his romance and seductive magic, and laid bare as the hollow, straw man that Bowie has long known him to be, yet seems compelled to face as he contemplates his own impending death. If you like what you see, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to become one of the Looking Glass people and get regular updates on my content. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.